Welcome back to VCT China, recapping week 2 and of course doing predictions for week 3, which I believe includes cloves, so I have a sneaky suspicion that somebody in China will surely play them, and all the more reason to keep up with the scene. Speaking of which, China is on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday, 10 AM BST, and whilst there's no English broadcast, you can catch me watch party in the games, trying to learn some Mandarin, but most importantly cluing you up on the region as a whole, so let's sort of jump in with what's happened this week. And we start with JDG versus Nova. Going into kickoff, this was the second best team in the region of JDG, going up against arguably the worst in Nova. But how wrong I certainly was. Whilst JDG do look significantly better with White's Chen IGL in, I think, and even picking up the first map of Sunset, Nova came in with some really cooked ideas. They ran triple Initiator, Breach Sky and KO without a Viper on bind, and JDG just couldn't keep up with the new ideas, didn't know how to play it. Third map was Ascent where Nova ran a breach, and similarly JDG only picked up the pistol and rounds following because they couldn't really play up against this idea that Nova were playing, and they didn't even win a full buy properly. A lot of teams have this issue, by the way, where they're like trying to play like meta comps, like Fnatic's Lotus, for example. We saw it with KC like losing to Foot last week. When some team brings out crazy ideas, you don't really have the theory behind it. But I think especially when you've got new players, new roles, and most certainly in JDG's case, a new IGL, they really struggle to deal with teams running off meta picks. A lot of China teams do. But that was pretty much JDG through and through. Was Nova looking good, or was it more JDG looking bad? Was the main question I got. And I have to say, Nova looked exceptional. But they just got to do everything that they wanted with their comps. They had some really good theory behind it, and they played really well. I am still hopeful that JDG can turn it around, but playoff chances for Shanghai might be dashed at this point, and I can't imagine JD Gaming as an organization is necessarily going to be happy about that. It's a big series for JDG this week, going up against Dragon Ranger Gaming. It's the Ascension Grand Final rematch, and yeah, there's a lot riding on it for both sides, because if both of them lose, I don't think they're going to Shanghai. I don't think their chances are there. FPX versus DRG. DRG had to play twice this week, but actually made a good run of it. They lost 13-11 on Breeze to FPX, who had an incredibly bright start. But overall, I'd say it's been a much better team performance from DRG, especially Luke. DRG kept their form on Icebox, which is pretty much their best map at the moment, and they fell short massively on Sunset, losing pretty hard. FPX were also cooking with a really nice comp as well. They had the KO Gecko, but instead of having a Cypher, they replaced it with a Viper, which feels like it could be exploitable in some places. But I think overall, what we saw from FPX idea-wise was fairly good. They continue to look in amazing form, and it feels like they've got one foot in the door for their playoff chances. And really, if you want to bank on a team making Shanghai, like EDG, obviously, but FPX are still looking in fantastic form. So yeah, great position to be in just before Shanghai qualifiers start up. AG versus Wolves. It was a frustrating series to watch, especially if you're a fan of AG, because you win all of the pistols as AG, you win 2 bonuses, but then you fall short against Wolves, who sort of worked out how to play against you as the maps went on. What makes it worse is that AG had an 11-3 lead on Icebox, and then they end up losing 14-12 in overtime. Wolves, however, look great. Spring is in much better form, looks much more comfortable. The whole team looks better on the roles that they're playing. However, AG have a really good roster. They have good pieces, but they can't pick up their own map choices. They chuck out leads when they should be winning at least a map in the series. And if they don't work it out, they're going to be bottom of the league in no time. The other big problem, I suppose, as well, is like on other teams, you have a lot of clutch out players. People like RB for Tech can do crazy stuff. Luke and Vukashu, especially for Dragon Ranger, can have pop-off moments. I don't know who that's meant to be for all gamers. Like Bunt and Monk as a core are really solid. I think Del B as a duelist and Sentinel has been performing really well, but there's no like pop-off player. You're not winning any of these clutches. In fact, you're letting clutches happen against you, like that 1 versus 5 that they lost against DRG last week. Like, you can't be losing rounds like that if you're not winning those kind of clutches either. So yeah, my perspective on AG is kind of faltering a little bit if they can't get their mental in order. And it's a shame because they're a really solid team that should be doing a lot better than they are. Trace versus BLG. I said that this would be a good series, and it was. The first map is split, especially going away with BLG 13-11. BLG running their old comp from Champs, the Cypher, Viper, Omen, Sky, Raze, which is super popular, the Sentinels comp. BLG kind of played it first way back when, and it's best in slot for them, and they made it work. However, Breeze and Bind are the maps that Trace ended up taking 13-7. Fung continued to be in a top tier performance when it comes to the form that they're in. literally looking like the best player in the league right now, alongside the likes of Life and I guess Kung Kung to an extent too. Trace continue on at the top of the Omega group based on round difference over FPX, whilst BLG could definitely like take a lot of positives, I think, from this series, especially with everybody else in the Alpha group dropping a lot of maps and series that they might not be able to. It feels like BLG's position to make playoffs is at least looking more concrete. And you get tested early with this like iteration of the roster, with Bale as a coach. And so, yeah, like BLG, I think they can really perform well and maybe in for a dark horse shot at making Shanghai. Like, I think they are in a really good position, to be honest. DRG versus Tech. After Tech's victory versus Wolves in their first game, and playing up against the team with 2 fixtures this week of DRG, you'd kind of think that they would be the favourite. They win the first map 13-4 on Breeze, with players like AC, Kuwai, and Mandarin. But most importantly, it's not RB that's just carrying this team. There was much more of a team performance, and having individuals show up that isn't RB is nice. And I'm sat there thinking that Tech's chances of making Shanghai could be pretty solid because it was a brilliant first map for them. Unfortunately, I feel like I ended up speaking too soon, and DRG showed a much more improved split from the last time that these two teams faced in kickoff. They changed their comp to the one that I mentioned with BLG, because everybody's running that nowadays. And then with Icebox as the final map, DRG obviously very comfortable there, winning against FPX. Actually won 13-5 here, with an 11-1 lead on their attack side. So Tech might have let a huge opportunity slide here, and DRG keep their playoff dreams alive, at least for the time being. They have JDG next week or the week upcoming, and yeah, whoever loses that, I think they're out for Shanghai, right? So there's a lot to play for in either case. And let's see if DRG can, make it 2 for 2 when they're playing up against this JD squad in big games like this. And finally, EDG versus Tyloo. I've been kind of down and out, I think, on like EDG for a bit, even though they're sort of dominant in China. They're not looking as convincing as I'd like them to. But this series did a lot for my hope, even despite the fact that this is EDG 2-0ing against a team that haven't picked up a series at all in China as of yet. Firstly, the reason why I like this EDG roster now is that roles seem to be much more encouraging for their side. You've got Smoggy playing on main controller, Kung Kung's back on the main duelist, Chichu's mostly on Viper but can play some Sentinel, I assume, and then Haodong's sort of flexing, almost being the John Cutie role of the squad. And then you've got Nobody, or Wanga, I guess it would be, Wangbro, playing main initiated, playing stuff like Gecko and looking fantastic on maps like Sunset, where they won 13-5. Second map was Bind, map that we actually saw Tyloo destroy Billy up against last week. And it was a little bit more like sloppy, I suppose, from EDG. But he ended up winning against a team that's really good on his side. But Tyloo, continued to look fairly decent. AAK's duelist looked comfortable today. HFMI, or what is it, Zemaga, Alphabet Bro, I think it is. I'm still trying to learn the proper name, or at least the names that the China community is calling them. But HFMI continues to be flourishing on the new Sentinel role, and I really enjoyed watching Aaron as well, on that position. He's fit into this team amazingly well. And so I feel like Tyloo, I like dual win. It's not like they look as bad as Bleed at the moment, or old DFM from last year, but beating China's best team this week was a little bit of a stretch. But now that we've recapped all of the stuff that's happening in the previous week of China, let's go over my Pickems that I did previously on stream. So I'll just say bye-bye for now. Week 3. So first of all, who's the team that's playing twice? Nova Esports, they're playing Tyloo and FPX. So game day 1, Wolves versus Trace. I think I'd have to go with Trace there. Wolves, I'm sort of impressed with the win against All Gamers. I'm also impressed in them having to bounce back. But I think All Gamers kind of had a lead on Icebox and should have seen it through. What were they up? 11-3? And ended up losing in overtime in loud Fnatic fashion. So yeah, Trace, they've looked good. They've been pushed a little bit more with Billy taking a map from them, for example. But I feel that they have enough about them. A Wolves win here would sort of reinvigorate their chances of playoffs. But I don't know if that's really that likely. Nova versus FPX. The big question, I suppose, is, has Nova got enough about them to have a good upset win last week with JDG and then go on and beat FPX? I don't think so. If Nova was playing up against maybe Trace, Billy, hell, even EDG, there's definitely a world where I think Nova could actually come in and continue this great run of form. But I think FPX at the moment are the team that's playing with the most confidence and the most dominant in the region, I think. So I think I I want to see Nova like take a map here potentially, kind of like DRG did. But I think that FPX's map veto is a little bit stronger. This would be a really good series. Actually, having both these series could be a lot more close and exciting than they might initially look. Billy versus All Gamers. Yeah, I just think the Billy should be looking pretty good. It sort of comes down to like map pool. Some of the stuff that All Gamers has been running has been pretty splendid. Like Billy's bind has not been looking that great, but obviously still working on it. So I think All Gamers just continuing this sort of like run of losses after beating DRG in week 1. Just tough opponents to play up against. DRG versus JD Gaming. Ascension rematch, finally. So like Rare Atom versus DRG effectively. Am I still like being wrong about JD picks thus far? No, I predicted them losing here, but I predicted them beating Nova and they didn't. I think DRG did look good last week. It was a tough week for them because they played twice, but they took a map off of FPX and then actually came out and beat Tech. Tech have been better than JD Gaming. Oh man, it's tough. This is a really like tricky series to call, I think, because neither team has necessarily been that high on confidence. So I think DRG is maybe the favorite here. Like, I think I've given like JD Gaming enough chances to beat teams around them like Nova, and it hasn't worked. So ultimately, it's them that have to do the surprising. But I'll be cheering on JDG, obviously, because I think that they looked good, I think, against Edward Gaming, and against Nova, they didn't look too bad. Actually, that's a good question. I'm switching it around. The main reason is JD Gaming against teams that are playing like off-meta stuff look completely lost. However, DRG have sort of run into playing a lot of meta stuff at the moment. So if it is kind of like mirror comps, I think JDG have enough or more about them to deal with that than DRG would. So I think that's the sort of win condition there for JD Gaming, but it depends on the maps and if DRG are going to do something that's a little bit off kilter that JD Gaming can't deal with. Tyloo versus Nova. Nova look great at the moment. Tyloo don't look that bad. Like even against DDG, didn't look too terrible. But Nova are definitely like on a run. And then EDG versus Tech. I was really disappointed with like Tech losing this series against DRG. So I think that Edward Gaming, with their role change, actually having Smoggy on the main controller, it looks so much better now. A bit rough around the edges depending on the map, but I think that's just because they have a couple of roles to like switch around, really. So I think that's probably my pick'ems for China at least. Like Trace beating Wolves, FPX beating Nova, Billy beating All Gamers. I think this is the series that's the hardest to call. Oh man, this is going to be the one that I'm like really unsure on. Like DRG, I'm definitely down and out on them a lot of the time. Some series that they've had, they've been woeful on. It's just all on like what we see from JD Gaming, honestly, and how prepared they are. I just think they have enough manpower to make this work. Luke hasn't really been in the best form for DRG outside of a couple of maps here or there. And Vukashu definitely hasn't been on the same level as they have been previously. So that'd be like my pick'ems that I'm locking in. But I feel that I'm more likely to be wrong about this. And maybe one of these like series throws a little bit of a curveball. But I think it's kind of a standard week, really. It's a shame that the game I'm the most unsure on is the one that I think I'm unable to watch because I'm casting. But yeah, that's probably where I'd say with my pick'ems.